Okay, hi everyone. I wore my most outrageous sweater to go with this outrageous Zoom background. So this is fun. Today I'm presenting on Draft Policy 2020-2, and it's about grandfathering organizations that were removed from the waitlist by implementation of ARIN 2019-16 last year. I'm going to go into a little bit of background about that. So back in February 2019, the ARIN board chose to suspend issuance of all IPv4 through the waitlist in light of some misuse and fraud that became apparent at that time. And then the board referred the section about the waitlist in the NRPM called Fulfilling Unmet Needs to the Advisory Council for a recommendation. So with that policy suspended, the Advisory Council worked on some new language that would hopefully prevent fraud of this nature in the future, and came up with an updated waitlist policy that went into effect on July 10th of last year. So in order to address fraud and misuse, the updated policy added some additional constraints on an organization's eligibility for getting resources from the waitlist. And then it also added some constraints on the subsequent uses of those resources. So those constraints include limiting the block size that an org can get to a /22. So that's the largest size that anyone on the waitlist can obtain. It also placed a limit on the total existing IP address holdings of a party that made them eligible for the waitlist. So any org that is in possession of a /20 or less is eligible. Any party that has more resources than that is not eligible for the waitlist. And it also made resources issued from the waitlist completely ineligible for transfer until a period of 60 months was up, so 5 years. So if you get resources from the waitlist, you can't just turn around and transfer them and monetize those. It's a 5-year holding period before an org can do anything with those. And so this presented a problem to a couple of orgs who were on the waitlist. And I just want to highlight sort of the changes. So in the old policy, requesters could specify the size of block they desired, and they could also specify the smallest size of block that they were willing to accept if it became available on the waitlist. The old policy did not place a limit on the total existing holdings. So right now, if you have more than a /20, you're ineligible. Previously, that was not the case. And then it also had a much shorter hold period. So resources issued from the waitlist were ineligible for transfer for 1 year, and now it's 5 years. And so the problem statement associated with this policy is that the implementation of 2019-16 unmet requests caused some organizations to be removed from the waiting list who had qualified or who were approved under the old policy's eligibility criteria. These organizations should have been grandfathered when the waitlist was reopened to allow them to receive an allocation of IPv4 up to the new policy's maximum size of a /22. So the policy statement is that we would add some temporary language into the NRPM that would be there until the policy objective is achieved. So we talked about whether this is best achieved through a number resource policy in the NRPM or best achieved through other means in a lot of depth at the AC. And we determined that the best way to do this is through a draft policy or through the policy process. And so the rest of the policy statement is that ARIN will restore organizations that were removed from the waitlist at the adoption of ARIN 2019-16 to their previous position if their total holdings of IPv4 address space amounts to a /18 or less, the maximum size aggregate that a reinstated organization may qualify for is a /22. So notice that that policy statement still has a constraint on an org's total holdings, where previously there was not. And then they would only qualify for up to the /22 that exists in the new policy. All restored organizations extend their 2-year approval by, and this is a variable, the number of months between July 2019 and the implementation of the new policy. And any requests made through a transfer will be considered fulfilled and removed from the waiting list. And this would be implemented immediately. So I have a few questions for discussion. There's not been discussion of this on PPML yet. So all of these are wide open. First of all, obviously, do you support, continue to work on it? The spirit of the proposal is the fact that some orgs were not grandfathered and removed from the waitlist a problem to begin with. If so, should grandfathered orgs still have a limit placed on their total holdings? So the proposal specifies a /18 instead of the /20 that's now in the NERPM. And then last, should grandfathered organizations be eligible for the new limit of a /22 or for their requests based on the previous version of the policy? So as it's written currently, it's up to that /22. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, good. Thank you for putting that back on that slide. So the queues are open. You do, if you want to get your feedback posted, will need to either use the Q&A or the hand raise. There will not be a poll on this draft policy. There's none been requested. So if you're waiting till the end to do that, you'll be disappointed. So again, it's just as easy as just putting in a Q&A, support or not. And with that, we will take, I see we have 2 Q&A, which we will take first, and then we will go to our attendees with hands up. So let's get both comments in, please. The first one in, please, Beverly.
Sure. Laura Ling, Amerisource Bergen. What checks are done on organizations before space is assigned? Don't the requests require our new RSAs?
Do one of the staff Johns want to address that?
Let me see if I can get a video going. Certainly. So as we've said before, updated RSAs, we do ask if you have an RSA that's very old, more than 2 versions back, staff will ask you to update your RSA to the current one. That's actually a benefit because the RSA terms are both clearer and have been to the community's benefit in the revisions. Regarding the first half of that question, I guess, Paul, could you repeat that briefly? Or I'm sorry, someone could read it to me one more time? Of the organizations, I lost that question. If someone can bring me the first half.
Sure, no problem. What checks are done on organizations before space is assigned?
We validate the organization to make sure it's representative of who is of who's coming, that they have the right, that they represent the organization exists. If there's other additional qualifications people are expecting, they need to let us know.
Okay. Let's take the next question, please.
Owen DeLong, Farsight Security, ARIN AC, support continued work. Mixed emotions about what is most fair here. I think should keep a max /22 if we do this.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to our first raised hand, please. Please, again, state your name and affiliation.
Chris Tassett, you should be able to talk at this point.
Okay, thank you. Can you folks hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. So, so I think definitely work should continue on this.
Chris, just sorry, before you get too far, and could you just give us your affiliation?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
ARIN AC.
Just keep it even.
Yeah, and Tassett Law. So I definitely think we should continue working on this. I think it's a basic fairness issue that you know, the people who were on the list should be able to continue, but under the new rules. So having said that, I think the /20 is the appropriate limit. for reentry. But I do think that the new limit of a /22 is appropriate as the new max. So in other words, we're just trying to put people in as much as possible in the same position they would have been if they hadn't been accidentally bumped off the list.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chris. So in support of the problem, thank you for that. Let's go to our next hand raise, please.
Thank you, Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Yes, I support continuing to work on it. Yes, I support the /18. And I actually believe that the grandfathered orgs should be allowed to, based on what their initial request would be, get what is in the new policy up to a maximum of the /20, which is allowed over time in the current policy. My only caution, and the reason why I wanted to say this over voice rather than text, is this sets a precedent in terms of the changing of or allowing old policy to still be in place depending on when somebody requests something, which is generally has not been the case. I believe there is a very unique situation to this. It was part of a emergency action to close off a loophole. It was then part of a very rapid development of policy related to how to fix the problem so that we could open back up the waiting list. And so this is a very unique point in time situation that I would urge the community to specify. This is not setting a precedent overall when it comes to old policy versus new policy in terms of that. But otherwise, I do support all of this. I think that, again, based on just getting the waiting list fixed, there was a determination at the time to work on this, and I would like to see it hopefully come to fruition soon. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the validity of those requests from years ago would be. Thank you.
Thank you. John Kern, did you want to respond to that? You have to unmute, John. As much as
I wanted to echo something Kevin said that's pretty important. It's actually two unique circumstances here. In general, when we change policy, requests that are made under the new policy once adopted. In the case of waitlists, you really have a case where people make a request under the existing waitlist policy, they're put on the waitlist, and then months or years can pass before they actually receive resources. So the first thing is that we have people who did qualify under a prior policy, and it's a long period of time. Even that, normally we promptly decide how to handle them when we change the waitlist. And we've changed the waitlist before and specified how to handle existing requesters. In this case, the second aspect that makes it even more unique is those long-standing requests were suddenly put in a hold because of a board action to suspend policy, and then a very quick process to put a new policy in place. So it's a very unusual circumstance that we'd have people qualify under an old policy, have a new policy adopted in such quick time frame that didn't consider the transition aspects. I don't think this is precedential, but I agree with Kevin. We should be very clear that this is to handle a very unique circumstance and change if people decide to proceed with it.
Okay. I'm going to actually just wind down there because we've actually come to our break, I believe. Or we either right, correct? Yes. Okay. So we're going to ask those that have their hands up to keep them up during the break. We will let you all go stretch for 30 minutes, I believe. And we will return right where we left off so everyone can get the fest into this. So John, in the 20 seconds we have, I'll leave you to throw it away. Okay,
thank you. Just want to let folks know that we are on break. We're going to come back and pick up right where we are. You have 30 minutes. We'll see you back here at 1:20 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone back to our meeting. As we were leaving, we were midst discussion of the policy proposal. So let's continue with the questions, and I'll turn it over to our chair, Paul Anderson, to moderate the discussion. Go ahead, Paul.
So thank you. Yeah. So yes, we're in the this draft policy still. We have a bunch of Q&A that's kind of queued up. I'm going to ask if we can kind of hit someone specifically, just because I know that we've tried to during the break get some of the data for them. So let's start with Chris Woodfield, if we can.
Sure. Chris Woodfield, Twitter, ARIN AC, of the organizations that were kicked off the waiting list on the implementation of last year's policy, how many were disqualified due to total holdings versus the size of their waitlisted requests?
John Sweeting. I believe John was trying to get that data.
Yeah, I'm here. I just don't have any video. So I'm going to give you 4 numbers here. There was 365 requests on the wait list when the new policy was implemented. Going through a process that we put together, 37 were removed because they had more than a /20. Of those, 13 have more than a /18. 79 requests were adjusted down to a /22 because they were more than a /22. Of those 79, we updated tickets to all 79 of them to advise them of that. And they all came back and said they still wanted the 22, and they all still got the 22. And then there was 249 requests that were unaffected.
Okay, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
All right, let's take our next Q&A.
Next Q&A, David Farmer, University of Minnesota. I support the intent of this policy. This is a policy matter. However, it seems to be modifying the implementation of ARIN 29-16. I think the limit should be a 22. I support eliminating the /20 total for organizations on the wait list prior to the implementation of ARIN 2019-16.
Thank you, David. So we'll take that support. Let's take one more Q&A and then go to raised hands.
Sure. Adam Thompson from Merlin. I agree with the entire concept of retroactively grandfathering anyone back to the into the wait list unless they meet the new criteria. There's legitimate fairness argument. There is a legitimate fairness argument there, but the board changed the policy for a reason. Why circumvent it?
Thank you. And let's go to our hand raise. And again, please state your name and affiliation, even though your name will be stated prior.
Tina, you're on mute. You're ready?
Thank you. Tina Morris, Amazon Web Services Advisory Council Chair. I just wanted to add a couple of things for context. First, I support this policy work. I think it's really important. In fact, I think it's so important that when the board asked us if we wanted to have a meeting or cancel the meeting, I said, and I talked to the AC about this, we were all in consensus that this policy couldn't wait until October to be discussed with the community. We think this is super important. We don't take lightly this policy change that we made. We really struggled with this choice and the limits we set, and I'm happy to revisit those. However, we can't forget a couple of things. For one, the wait list was never guaranteed space. If you were planning your business on this space, you put together a very bad business plan. I'm glad, I've always been in support of the wait list. I am glad that space isn't sitting there not being used. I'm glad it can be recycled, glad it can go to good. However, there were bad actors. There were people waiting that year and cashing out on the space. By grandfathering requests back in, we will again enable that. I know that's a cost of doing business. I accept that, that's fine. But we need to realize that not everybody that was removed from this wait list was a good business with little information and waiting for their space to grow their business. There were some people on there purely getting space to sell it. And that's what we were trying to block. The AC has no intentions of doing this as a regular basis, and I really support the community discussing these changes, and we'll make the changes that you want to implement. But I know from my day job, I had people, I buy IP addresses for Amazon. I get requests for space, or I get people that approach me to sell space all the time. I had people specifically call out that they had to wait for the counter to run out on this so they could sell space to me. I had that happen on more than one occasion. There are bad actors in this. We can't block them all. We can't, psychically know what people are going to do with the space. So I'm happy to revisit this, but we can't treat it like everybody that was removed was a victim. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you for those comments. Let's go back to a Q&A, and then we'll go back to an attendee.
Okay, back to Q&A. Joseph Chamblee from Ascension Technologies, curious how many orgs are impacted. I continue to support work and agree that with the 22 limit.
Okay. Let's go back to the attendees then.
For the next hand, you mean?
Next hand, yes, thank you.
Sure. Kevin Bloomberg, you are able to speak.
Go ahead, Kevin, please. You're muted, it looks like. As a reminder, when we let you speak, you still have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. Thank you. I appreciate what Tina's saying, and I think it's also important then to revisit that aspect in regards to the fraud component and making sure that people are not in that scenario. And I don't, maybe fraud's the wrong word. People who are profiting from the old policy. So I do understand that, and that definitely needs to be wrapped up into something. A clarification: if the entity gets space under this, it is a 5-year hold at that point for transfers. Is that correct? And that's a question for the AC.
You said for the AC, but John Curran, the 16th member of the AC, would like to respond.
I can speak up. Yes, that is a condition we added to try to deter the fraud. We thought that would be a heavy hand to prevent people from trying to flip space.
Yep.
Right. Just to be clear, as the policy was implemented, that was a requirement, the 60-month requirement. The max size issued was a requirement. And all, as John Sweeting said earlier, that was everyone who was waiting on the list was offered to have that. Those two items alone deter fraud. The place where you couldn't apply it and provide discretion, telling someone if you get the space, you have to wait 5 years, they could say, oh, don't bother giving it to me. Telling them if you get the space, you're only going to get a 22, they could say, that's too small, it's not worth it. The place where we didn't provide discretion, and yet there may have been parties waiting for some time, was in the total address holdings, because it's not something someone can agree to comply with or has to have their request removed. We, in fact, didn't give anyone who had been waiting a choice because the AC's new policy was quite clear that total holdings was a disqualification. So there are multiple fraud protections that would still apply. The only real question was, at the point in time when this policy was written and adopted, what was the intent of handling those who were on the list and already had address holdings greater than the limit? Was there an intent that some transition be provided or not? There's no record that says it was considered either way, and hence this policy is a worthwhile policy to discuss. That doesn't mean it should happen, and it doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. But since we don't have a record of specifically how to handle the people who have more address space and are already on the wait list, it's a worthwhile discussion.
Okay, we're going to be closing the queues in 1 minute exactly, so please get your questions in or raise your hand. We're going to go to Andrew Dole next, please.
Andrew Dole, ARIN AC, 8 Continents Networks. Don't support the policy as currently written. I think the AC did its job and found the line that we needed to. And unfortunately, there will always be some organizations when you have to draw a line that will maybe not get exactly what they want. So I think we found a good line. I'm happy to discuss it, but I think that moving the line slightly back further to get a few people on the wait list is the right decision.
30 seconds left till the queue closes. Can we go back to our Q&A, please, and clear up that, please?
Yes. I also have one more hand up as well.
Yep, no, I see the hand.
Okay.
Yep.
No problem. Tom, oh, sorry, it's jumping around. Tom Pruitt, Stratus Networks. I support continued work on this. I would support no limit on both parts of the discussion, but can support having limits suggested.
The limit suggested, I believe, yeah. Okay, thank you for that comment. Next Q&A.
And Marseille Arnold, Obsidian Group Incorporated, is in the support of fairness for people who are delisted to be grandfathered with the new limits as proposed in the process.
Okay.
In this process.
We have closed the queue. I believe we've got all our Q&A now. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we have one last raised hand. So could we go to the raised hand, please?
RS, you should be able to speak now.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for making all the chatter on all the other channels. I was concerned that my hand was not showing. Robert Seastrom, ARIN Advisory Council. John Kerr and Kevin Bloomberg both brought up important points of fairness, and I thank John Sweeting for bringing the data on who did what and what happened to certain organizations when the policy changed, because it really informs my thinking on this. I want to echo Tina's point that the wait list, oh my goodness, the wait list was never guaranteed space. And further, I want to underline that getting space with the intent of flipping it as soon as the timer ran out was also never the intent of the wait list. When we talk about fairness, it's important to not only consider those who were on the wait list and are now removed because of total holdings, but also those who are new on the wait list for smaller amounts. And it's really at their expense that we're putting folks who, I'll be a little uncharitable and say, didn't get lucky enough. And there's 37 organizations, and I am sorry that they were adversely affected, but sometimes policy changes, and I am therefore not in favor of this policy proposal to undo that policy change as written. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And with that, I'll leave it. Alyssa, any closing comments from you?
No, I think that's great. Just that I'll be poking PPML about this too. And if you want to weigh in there and you haven't yet today, then please do. Yes, excellent point. Even though there will not be a poll, if you had a thought after this that you'd like to add, you can either post the PPML or the name of the shepherds are, such as Alyssa on this one, is on the website, and you can always reach out to the shepherds directly with any thoughts and questions you might have for one-on-one. So with that, I'll thank Alyssa for her presentation and say farewell for now, and we will turn it over to Andrew Dahl for our last policy of the day. So Andrew, take it away when you're ready.